Om Purusham Artam Shunyanam Gunanam Pratiprashavaha Koivaya Pratista Swarupam Vachati Shakti iti. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. That primal force, the Mahashakti, who returns transmigrating consciousness to its source, stripping away name and form, and time and space in the interim, accomplishes all these tasks and returns the soul to its original state of emancipation. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana, Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahana Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karvo Vahai, Tejasvi Navaditamastu, Ma Vidvesho Vahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us, and may Brahman sustain us, and may Brahman illumine our thinking consciousness. May we not find fault with the world, with the teachings, or with what we study. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. So how to say at this juncture in our series of classes on mantra and karma, how karma can be destroyed by utterance of the mantra. I've been getting questions from some of you regarding that, how those dynamics work, inner dynamics. And people, of course, as I used to complain to Holy Mother too, that mantra's not working for me. And I usually say, because you don't see how it's working, so many things are being added into your life, and so many things are being struck from your life because of your utterance of the mantra, yet these things you don't see. As she said, like you don't see the landscape go by on a train from one destination to the other, and fall asleep and don't see the bushes and trees go by, and you wake up at your destination. So mantra is rather like that. So you have to have faith in that. So an immediate dharma nugget here of teaching, because SRE is pretty much all dharma all the time, it doesn't stint on that and or skimp on it, and also deepens it over time. The more you adhere to it, the more you hear, and the deeper it goes in, these powerful words, which are a part and parcel of mantra. Also slokams and sutras and mahavakyas. There are various words for these powerful words. Bijams, for instance, or Vak Devi, the goddess of the world, the word, which I was just talking about in this beautiful final sutra of yoga by Patanjali, when I was stating that she returns the soul to its final emancipation, but asked to do that after stripping away name and form and time and space, which are all aspects of Maya. And so is this karma. They often call karma the Maya fivefold. So many five quintuplication teachings we know of. So inside of fivefold Maya, there's also that name, form, time, space, and karma, or causation, nimitta it's called. Nama, rupa, desha, kala, and nimitta. If if you want to know the ancient Sanskrit for it. So for a long time, for a time out of mind, as they say, they've been aware of these obstructions to the individualized soul, or apparently individualized soul, because we have to be careful. We use the word self and all that. We were in the midst of the Buddhists last night, for instance, paying homage to Thich Nhat Hanh at the local center here, Buddhist center. So there's this idea of no self, and then there's this idea of there being a self. Astika and Nastika basically are the words for that. And some philosophies tend away towards the idea of a separate or individual self. And it's a good thing they do, because usually that's the ego. I remember my teacher, Swami Shishnandaji Maharaj, peace and bliss be upon him, saying that you all pray to God and here in Christian nation and so forth, but actually your prayers are really to your egos. There is no God. So it sounded like he was an atheist, but there he was worshiping Sri Ramakrishna, Paramahamsa, as the highest deity, and in a lineage of beings who go all the way back to the greats like Shankara and Gaudapada, who did profound worship of Lord Shiva, for instance, even though they were non-dualists. So you'd have to look deeper into the statement of there is no God, in the sense of what they mean in the Astika systems, when they say no separate self. It's just, even Buddha used those terms, the great self and the small self. And of course, the small self would be the anatman, and the great self would be the atman in Vedanta speak. Or he used the word pragyaparam, the supreme intelligence, when he referred to divine reality that was nameless, formless, and as we just said, timeless, spaceless, nameless, formless, and causeless. So understanding this is a great advantage for the advanced practitioner of today, caught in this cycle of Maya, or caught maybe observing this cycle of Maya going on in terms of so many races and countries, going through so much suffering and having so little knowledge, that is, in other words, being pressed by ignorance of their true nature because of a simple argument like that. Is there a self? Is there not a self? Does God exist? Does God not exist? God is existence, and thou art that, is how Advaita would conclude for you. So, okay, well, thank you for telling me. Now I can go on and drink in these huge amounts of this Dharma, and any shades of ignorance that are left in other areas of my thinking or intelligence or the inner worlds will quickly fall away, and just like that scenery going by on a train. It'll be of little merit or little no matter, never mind, as my teacher used to say. All these things will just pale to insignificance, and you will be there living the dharmic life in your true self without any doubt about it. Sounds very nice, doesn't it? So this is a quick preamble to reintroducing you to our subject, which has been with us for some months now. We've taken at least 2 breaks in it. And this last one was a longer break because I was just on the US mainland, West Coast, and was there teaching at a retreat about the Annapurna Upanishad. We dived even deeper into that. And then important about the Amrita Nada Upanishad. We've already studied the Amrita Bindu. So these are 2 very profound Vedantic texts or scriptures that we looked into that sport not only that non-dual strand that runs through Vedanta, but also speaks about all the divine principles like Jivan Mukta, the living liberated condition. All well and good maybe, and possibly even necessary to talk about Maya and ignorance and suffering all the time. But it sure would be nice to mix in some words about divine remembrance and about your true self and about the living liberated condition that we just talked about. Kaivalya was the word Patanjali, father of yoga, used. It's sort of like the same with the passing of Thich Nhat Hanh, whom we honored last night at this Buddhist temple nearby. You hear a lot from the media and from people about the warmongers and people whose politics are skewed and who like to commit violence for whatever reason. There are probably many. And this can be talked about forever, ad infinitum, and brooded upon and worried about and focused upon and emphasized. But where in all of that is a mention of a great soul like Thich Nhat Hanh, a peacemaker like Jesus, or somebody who's totally nonviolent like Mahavir and Lord Buddha? That we need to keep hearing about. So this has been my feeling over this last 49 days, which is how long Lord Buddha sat under the bo tree, because yesterday was the 49th day of Thich Nhat Hanh's passing. So we want to remember these great souls and remember the peace that passes all understanding, as Jesus said, as being the very nature of this Atman. It's not an add-on to it, like, oh, I have to seek peace, or maybe I'll get peace in the future, or where is peace gone to? It's that peace is the very nature of our nature. It's the essence of our nature, and it can't be changed that way. Even the great Advaitists, non-dualists, tell us that. Gaudapada talks about peace as being the very nature of the Paramatman, right in his commentary on the Mundaka Upanishad. So reading these Upanishads is what we've been doing for the past couple of weeks while we've been aware, while we've been away and aware of the necessity of passing these Dharma teachings on to other people. And we do it at great lengths. We do it at great sacrifice to ourselves and to our own lives by traveling and warding off diseases and illnesses and resistance and various things that we encounter amongst the people of today, fear and doubt being some of it. That one who realizes the bliss of this Brahman and these teachings, they destroy doubt and fear forever. And so it is, the seers of India conclude. That's their Dindima, that's their Siddhanta, that these things are put to death based on the fact that they were never real to begin with, which is a whole nother way of looking at suffering and ignorance that maybe even some advanced thinkers and believers in shunyata, emptiness, might want to take a deeper look at. The non-existence of these things in the first place, maybe even as the Ashtavaka Samhita puts it, renounce everything, renounce, then renunciation, then renounce renunciation and non-renunciation, then renounce the idea of existence and non-existence, because the self is all there is. The self is all in all. None else exists, and thou art that. Swami Vivekananda was to say just 125 years ago when he was in the body. So we've come back to you then here on the SRV station for those few dozen of you who are looking from Europe, from India, hopefully, and here in America, to take up this topic of karma and mantra. It is basically how mantra can destroy karma outright, and if not destroy it outright, attenuate it or ease it, maybe even dissolve it for all times. Maybe philosophically sound to say, send it back to the source from which it came, which is Maya. And any one of those choices would be welcome to us, those of us who are seeking this ultimate freedom, whether it be via the path of God with form or via the path of the formless Brahman. Both are open and available to us here. So we've been doing this series of classes. I think this is maybe the third session or collection of classes. The first one had maybe 4, second one had maybe 4, and this one probably will also have 4 because we have this week, next week, and the following week, possibly 3 classes to end this out. We've been doing it based upon this beautiful word that we came across in Sanskrit, Manaha Prana Sambandha, Sambandha would be an intimate relationship. Mana would be mind, and prana would be this life force that's coursing. And we've been talking about life force as being not just a matter of food. Man does not live by food alone, kind of look at it. We've been also talking about it in terms of what Swami Vivekananda called psychic prana, because we can get a little bit too hung up or obsessed with the fact of our movement and our actions. And that's where the karmas come in on the physical level particularly. But we tend then to overlook where the karmas originate from. That's our mind. That's our thinking. And there's an energy that moves our thoughts. And if we could get a hold of that original prana, psychic prana, Vivekananda called it, we could stop our thoughts from happening. We could send our thoughts in a better direction, or we could neutralize our thoughts in deep meditation, for instance. So these are all very wonderful options and choices open to the yogi and yogini as well. So this one word says it all, manaha prana sambandha. We want to realize that there's a relationship between mind and life force. And it goes very deep, involution style, as we've been talking about a lot from our teachers of India, Lord Kapila and Patanjali, the fathers of Samkhya and yoga, talked a lot about this connections that you make inwardly, and therefore gives us involution as a better choice to just the scientific idea of evolution only. Evolution to a certain point, we'll turn around and find out that matter is empty, consisting of vibrating particles that change at a billionth of a second. About that time, you turn and you move back towards your source. And your source isn't up in heaven, as some would aver. The source isn't inside in the body, because the body decays. And the source is not backward in time, because that's just a dream you had. And it's a history that's past. The within that Jesus talked about is these kingdoms of heaven, or these lokas, the Tibetan Buddhists call them, or these bardos. That's the involution that we're talking about. So there are several ways of talking about that, and we've covered them all in our SRV history and its existence. But this one is a very special one. Out of this word, manaha prana sambandha, you have to rekindle that relationship between life force and mind. Somewhere there's the pipeline has been cut. See, the hose has been stepped on. The nadis have been cinched up. The prana has stopped flowing up the central channel. And so we can't reach our brain, as sometimes the kids say, and the old folks, I can't reach my brain anymore. See? So that's because the prana is crimped up along those inner channels and is not allowed to flow anymore. Like when you breathe, it helps them to flow. Funny story you heard last night was that when Thich Nhat Hanh had his stroke and was in the hospital, then when he came conscious, the nurse there said, "Everything's okay, sir. I want to teach you some breathing exercises." And so everyone who heard that laughed, because of course here's a master of breathing right there, and the nurse probably knows nothing about the true meaning of breath whatsoever. Of course, he couldn't talk, so all he could do is look at her and have a good inner laugh to himself. But that's the idea. This inner, it's this breath that's moving in us, this vayu, this wind. If it gets stopped up, then there's no access to thoughts, what to speak of higher thoughts. Or you could put it this way, your thoughts start to turn towards making war on a neighboring country. So you get starved of real energy that gives you healthy thinking. It's a very serious thing and a very true thing, which is why we need to look east. If we're looking in any direction at all, we need to look east to India as the mother of all religions and the grandmother of non-dual philosophy. Krishna says it in the Gita, I'm the mother and the father, I'm the grandmother and the grandfather too. So he is aware of these deep teachings from the very beginning of time. let's put it this way, from the very beginning of beginningless time, because one of the things they found out was that time is eternal and goes in cycles forever. Second thing they found out was I can get off those cycles, which was one of the beautiful teachings that Lord Buddha gave in his day, 550 years prior to Jesus, in India, when he told us to get out of the river and sit on the banks for a while. So that would be a kind of stopping of thought and breath. I arrest you. It's that word they even use in the Upanishads. Let's arrest the breath. Let's arrest the thoughts. Sort of like we're the police, and they have to behave and follow our orders. So you can arrest the senses, turn them off, arrest the energy that goes to them, and arrest the heartbeat and arrest the thoughts. It'd be better to do that from inside out. But to do it from outside in is called yogic practice, Yoga 101. And you're going to have to make some certain connections for that, which you know I'm famous for making and repeating many times. So, and this chart, then you can see, let me get my copy up here so I don't have to crane my neck here. You can see with that one word, although it is quite a few syllables, we're saying you can connect the living prana to the luminous mind. The prana that's not living, that's not moving, if you do connect it to that luminous mind, we're saying this is where skewed thinking comes from. This is where Bhranti Darshana comes from. That is intellect that has become Bhranti, deluded. Deluded intellect is how they put that in English. So the Upanishads and their rishis who wrote them, to review this quickly, told us in the Prajna Upanishad, the prana comes into the body from the Atman by an act of the mind. Whatever the mind thinks, that flows in and out via the prana, and verily leads, along with the Atman, into the desired realm. I'm going to read you all the quotes here to get us really warmed up to this. Holy Mother said, from pure food one gets pure blood. From pure blood, pure energy. From pure energy comes pure thoughts. And from pure thoughts, one gets pure mind. Pipalada said two things about the prana. It's a great old rishi. My young friend, the one who knows that imperishable one, which is of course Brahman, in which rests the mind, the prana, and the senses, verily becomes omniscient and enters into everything. So back to, referring back to Thich Nhat Hanh, one of his last statements is that I was never born and I never died. So that they're putting as one of the main quotes now in his name, now that he's passed from the body. So it reminds us of that. He will go into everything. He'll go into the streams, into the rivers, into the trees, into the grasses, into the sky. But everyone does that. They just do it unconsciously. A soul like him and others will go into those, transcend those, and go into the psychic prana, the inner worlds, go into the gods, go into the goddesses, go into the Trinity, and merge into Brahman. The whole thing will be filled with Brahman. That's the imperishable one they come to know through opening these channels of prana that are so important. So he also says about it, as the rays of the sun become united with it at the time of its setting and shine forth again when it rises, all the senses merged in the superior God called mind. You see here, manaha, prana. And when the mind sleeps, at that time, prana alone remains awake in that city, the city of 9 gates. I just chanted that word, Purusha. So basically, these 9 apertures are here in the body is a symbology, a symbolic reference to this, what leads to the indweller through the subtle senses. When you awaken the prana and make it move inward not just outward. The final quote here is, we're doing them all in one to remind ourselves. Not sure that I even spoke of this one yet, but there are the 5 basic pranas that you get even in the hatha yoga practices and so forth. They'll teach you about these, not very deeply or connecting them to the psychic prana, but nevertheless, you hear about them. One's called apana. That facilitates evacuation and generation. The samana distributes the offered food. Prana itself operates in and fills the senses. Through the main nadi, the udana carries the soul back and forth to the various worlds. And vyana pervades and moves through the many thousands of gross and subtle nerves. Prashna Upanishad again. You want to know about prana, you don't find it as listed in the 24 cosmic principles, or you won't find it listed even in the 36 spandhas of Shaivism or other lists. So you have to look for this specific references to prana, and then psychic prana, even more rare to find out about that. So I want to bring prana, the subject of it, to a close today, swiftly, because we've gone this far with this. Food, gain strength, increase your stamina, master your posture, purify your senses, equalize your breaths. That is the 3 parts of your breath, in, held, and out. And then you arrive at some knowledge of something called the prana, which we just saw here in 5 forms. Vivekananda called that the one prana in 5 forms. Then purify that prana, control the prana, raise the prana, and then the doorway opens to meeting great souls. With impure prana, you see, people don't go anywhere. Even if they go to religious organizations, they might not find themselves in the company of awakened people in some of these conventional centers that are out there, where you won't hear the leaders talking about anything but worldliness. They're not giving you the Dharma. And that also happened in India, by the way. The Brahmin priests stopped giving out the Dharma at one point to the Indian people. And that was responsible for that falling of the original ideals of ancient India to the present state today. So purify prana, control prana, raise prana. How I want to conclude that today in our shorter class, because we're still at these hour and 15-minute classes instead of the 3 hours that I was doing prior, is look at this for a few of its teachings, phases and permutations of the all-pervasive prana. The Svetasvatara Upanishad, a recent Upanishad than the Prashna Upanishad, says, controlling the heaven-aspiring senses and the life force with the help of the mind and intellect, the immanent soul so regenerates them as to enable them to manifest the infinite, self-luminous light of awareness. All that exists in the 3 worlds is under the control of prana, and prana is mother. May she transmit wisdom to us via this divine energy. So we can't leave prana then just as something that causes us to sneeze, causes our eyes to see, causes our body to evacuate its waste, and just leave it as a kind of physical 5-fold thing. But we have to take it more towards the way it moves our breath, the way it moves our thoughts finally, and the way that all of a sudden it is mother, that is her divine energy. About that time, you're beginning to replace the word prana with shakti and understand the dynamic power of Brahman. So the way I put together this chart with an image of Mother Mary there, and what's flowing out of her, is that it all starts with food, if you can see there. And we had that already said by Holy Mother here, from pure food one gets pure blood. Then it goes to the 5 elements, then the body and senses, then the rebirth with the ancestors. I would say the first 3 of those 4 are known to people, although the knowledge of them is not very consciously applied, not spiritually oriented. It's pretty much still a matter of matter. But if you get to the idea of rebirth with the ancestors, which some conventional religions have arrived at, that is, they are worshiping their ancestors, and that's as far as they'll go, then they're keeping some channels open in this world amongst the birth of infants and the coming together of male and female principle, the production of families, the idea of living a life and going to death and then passing off to heaven, controlling the heaven aspiring senses and the life force with the help of mind and intellect. The soul then regenerates them and enables them to manifest the self-luminous light of the Atman. You can see how much further they went than even the ancestors when they looked at prana. Again, Shakti is what you're headed towards here. So basically, rebirth with the ancestors gives way to sacrifice to the gods. And there's where you're practicing like the 5 different sacrifices. They're called yagyas. First to the humankind, and then to the ancestors, and then to the gods and goddesses, and then to the great rishis. So you've got this tier of sacrifice that you're doing in your everyday life. The food you eat, you offer to them. The pictures you sit in front of ancestors and gods, you're offering to them, remembering their forms. All of this is a matter of daily activity in the Dharma. Beyond the sacrifice to the gods, you see there next tier, mind and psyche. That's the mind and intellect that you're going to want to connect the prana to. Like I say, it's really much better to start inward, as the great souls do, because they come from that place of awakened prana. They use the awakened psychic prana to get into forms. Other beings have forgotten that route, and they're just born. So they don't know where they came from. They don't know why they were born, what karmas they had that produced their birth, why they suffer when they live, and why they don't know anything beyond a great little study of life, to quote Swami Vivekananda, their whole life, or maybe for a series of lives. So this is how key the prana is to this process. I'm always repeating that. Better to start out with knowing all of this already, and then coming out and having everything that you prayed for ready for you, you see. That is accomplished by practicing the Dharma in this life. Like Tibetan Buddhists are really big on that. It could be that you'll not have a conscious death, but if you practice the Dharma in this lifetime, then you may have a conscious passing from the body. You may see the whole world of prana and how it reveals to you the inner worlds, like the Shambhala worlds in Buddhism, or like the lokas in Vedic times, or like the chakras in Kundalini Yoga. These things will get revealed via the opening of these passages, subtle passages, which are not physical, that the soul gets into and moves along. And it does the same from waking to dreaming to deep sleep, I like to repeat, so that you know you are visiting heaven when you go towards deep sleep, and you're coming back through heaven when you go back to your waking state. Everyone does this every night. Every 24 hours this is happening. Now we have to do it consciously, and that's why we meditate, so that we know and can see how the soul moves, so that soon we know that it doesn't move. Because should we go back and take the quotes again? It doesn't move. It's all pervasive. It's there all the time, and so is the Divine Mother Shakti. She doesn't rise up the chakras. She's at every chakra, waiting for you to rise. So, as far as movement, action, karma, in this case, good karma go, then you're going to want to facilitate this relationship between the flowing prana, apiyantu, mamangani, vak, pranas, chakshu, that helps you to see, chakshu, balamindriyani, which gives all of your senses, your indriyas, Cha Sarvani, every one of them, this access to prana, so that you see inside. You see with an inner vision. That's what the third eye is all about. Talking about the third eye before your prana is awakened is just really silly. It's supercilious, I was thinking, be a good way of calling it. So mind and psyche, I'm commenting a little longer there, but the cosmic intellect is next. Then you make your introductions to the great mind, Mahat, they call that. Sometimes they'll call it Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. You could even, well, it's coming, Shakti and Om. It's even like the word. It's like the vortex of everything, the main vortex. It's the penultimate chakra of the seven. And so the cosmic intellect is, a bit of that has become our own personal intellect down here on earth in this body. And those who have sharp intellects, they connect it right back up to the cosmic intellect easily and spiritually, not just scientifically, I must add. So then you go beyond the cosmic intellects and you say, oh, Mahat, you're so great. I can see, open the doors so that I can become one with my father or my mother. And so that I can hear the unstruck sound of Om, out of which everything comes pouring forth from the highest chakras down to the lowest, and which is there in filling everything. That's why a great soul who passes away becomes everything, because they've trained themselves in knowing the word. So if they pass away and they see earth or grass or trees, it's all earth to them. They'll be the prana in that. And if they pass away and they see lakes and oceans and waters, they'll see the prana in that. And if they pass away and they see sky and wind, they'll see the vayu, the air in that. And they're immediately okay with it because they were okay with it their whole life. Other beings are attached to those elements, earth, water, fire, air, in their different permutations, you see. So they're going to have to let loose of that somehow, slowly. That's what's called a difficult death. You have to be unattached or get unattached. Well, why should you have to bother with that? Should have never attached to it in the first place. All you needed was the vehicle of prana to get into it and out without paying any devil, you see. Otherwise, as Vivekananda said, a religion that doesn't teach you that is a devil's dance. That's not a religion at all. These conventional ways of talking, even up to just worshiping the ancestors, that's all she wrote, you see. No, the psychic prana goes all the way to the cosmic mind and to the divine couple themselves. So I think that was what I wanted to end the pranic part of this chart with, so we don't take a lot of time. I mean, you can call it this way too. It starts out, the process starts out very raw with grossly vibrating things like stocks and stones. And then it will proceed on to more refined, then to subtle, then to pure, then to transcendent. There's one graph you can use. There's another graph besides that, which you could call it gross, primal, vital, ethereal, celestial, divine, universal, and superconscious. So those are two different ladders of subtlety and grossity that you can use to measure the involution of the soul as it begins to use this prana to open up the secrets of consciousness to itself again. And for those of you who have a copy of Footfalls, which this chart is definitely in right near the beginning, go ahead and look at all the quotes here that I gathered that have to do with each one of these levels on these graphs and with each of these specific topics. And you'll find out that the rishis were well versed in knowing this prana that stays awake even when the mind sleeps. Let's end this with the this and this with that, with those words, because these other two quotes at top and bottom are here on this chart. They're so important. That's how rare quotes on the prana are. So let's go back then and continue our march inward. So I said, when you reach the prana, then you can frequent holy company. Now, here's a good example of holy company. And when you get holy company, you'll probably also start thinking in terms of, I want a mantra for this. How can I put this all down into a few words? There is a way. It's amazing, actually, when you come to understand that, is that there's so much teaching being given out by these great souls who shine with the light of Brahman, the ojas or tejas, they call that in Sanskrit. We have lights for that light, words for that light coming off the great souls in Sanskrit in ancient times. So when you come into their presence, it's rather awe-inspiring that they've got so many teachings to give you, and you haven't heard them in this lifetime, possibly, especially in a Western culture and society. So when you start to hear them, it can be overwhelming. We've heard that a lot. And we have our own experience with our teachers, which we were overwhelmed at the time. How am I going to get all this? And then all of a sudden you hear this marvelous word. You can have a mantra to consolidate all of that, to concentrate it all down in just a few words with a power bijam, a seed to them. And so this is where the art of mantra starts. And I think, 7, 8 classes ago, we took those charts on mantra. But we didn't take this one. So I wanted to show this in line with these two steps we're taking inward. That when the prana is purified and raised based upon this very good model that we've been following with dedication for years or however how long it takes, then all of a sudden holy company just appears to you. It's like the same way you open nadis inside with pure food and breathing. Then when that's accomplished, you open nadis out here in the same way to favorable teachers, to auspicious souls. And probably the purer the prana, the less likely it is that you're going to get attracted to charlatans, they call them, or to teachers who are giving you mixed teachings that don't concentrate on the Dharma, that can free you. You need to have somebody give you an injection of Brahma Gyan. My teacher did that for us. The West needs an injection of Brahma Gyan, he would say to us when he sat in front of 20 or 30 of us at his ashram. And I heard that just the other day from one of my students. Oh, you've been away for several weeks. Time for an injection of Brahma Gyan. I'm ready. So come forward, roll up your sheath, and get these teachings again. Because if you've heard them once and you become acclimatized to them, and then you have a couple of weeks of the world in the way, jobs, all of that, and the retreat is a few months off and so forth, you can find that just a few words in a class can just put you right back into that zone, they call it, where the Dharma will just leave you refreshed for the rest of the day. And so pretty soon you'll get the idea that you need to light your lamp on that fire of yoga, which we'll talk about in 2 weekends, or 3 weekends away. Be on hand for that seminar we're planning called The Fire of Yoga. And you need to be on hand for that and the injection that it leads to. So in that way, then you find out that the avenues to holy company open to you with a little qualification. They were there, but you weren't seeing them, as it were. And then all of a sudden you qualify yourself, and all of a sudden you meet a great soul, or you meet somebody who takes you to a great soul, like some of the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna in Calcutta there in the 1800s. Oh, there's this Paramahamsa over at the Kali temple. I want to take you and make you to meet him. So some of them got their introduction from other young men who had seen him. And so this was all the great news. This was the great secret. And then once you were there, you were captured. It's just like, that was it. You were attracted for all time to what you had been looking for many lifetimes, or what you had realized in a past lifetime and brought forward in this lifetime, like in the case of Swami Vivekananda. Narendranath, they called him the Lord of Men, when he met Sri Ramakrishna. So I am then broaching the subject of frequent holy company and select a guru and secure a mantra, all in one bite before the end of our class today. I'm hoping that we will be able to complete that to arrive at psychic prana, which will be next weekend's class. And I'm going to give you some levels of being next weekend that when we study them makes us realize one of two things. I don't have access to my psychic prana, or my psychic prana is already flowing. That'll be interesting. So be on hand for that. So no better way to start off a quick review or look at this fundamental facts about the mantra, because it does include in it words about the guru and about holy company. As Holy Mother says, God cannot be realized through japa, that's recitation of his names, worship and meditation. God is only realized through his grace. Nevertheless, one must perform japa and meditation, for they can remove the impurities of one's mind. God's grace then becomes revealed. So you can see how you could be very put off and disappointed when you found out there was such a thing as a mantra, but then that it wasn't going to help you, it wasn't going to actually take you to the ultimate goal. But if you didn't select a teacher and get a mantra, then you would never be able to receive the grace by practice. So this is where grace and self-effort go hand in hand. It's a very powerful teaching in the Ramakrishna order, particularly for the devotees, that is the householders and so forth, that these are the two wings of the bird, which we heard talked about so much in the ashram of Swami Sheshanandaji Maharaj. Grace and effort have to go hand in hand. So you do one in order to receive the other. It's like Sri Ramakrishna says, it's like going outside and looking up in the sky and thinking it's a windless day. I don't know if we've done that God vlog yet, but basically you put a kite up just for fun and you find out there's a ferocious wind blowing up there. So the idea is that you don't see grace at this lower level of mind. But if you just put a kite up one morning, like you decide to sit in your altar, offer incense with a devout heart, and crack a book, a scripture, and look at some slokas and contemplate them, all of a sudden this wind comes down to your level, or you rise to its level. Whatever the case may be, it refreshes you and opens you up to God's grace. And you see, at that point, you see you can have God's grace all the time, and you do have it. There's no way that you can be separate from divine reality when that's your very nature. And that's, of course, the good news of Vedanta. In other religions, it's not so well put and not so direct. So mantra, if we define it as science of cosmic sound. When you repeat it, Kundalini awakens. So this is the Shakti power we're talking about that was here in this last chart, and which we're moving towards. Here, Shakti Payas, see this fourth pillar here? We're definitely moving towards a fuller realization of the divine Shakti, which I chanted about in the very beginning of this class. Repetition of God's name will lead to the goal. Might not net you the goal yet, it will lead to the goal. So what is mantra? Vedic in origin. It's unique among spiritual practices. It's a universal mode of practice. It's effective as repetition. That is, it's supposed to be repeated. I was just talking yesterday at satsang in the morning how these doors that are blocking your inner vision actually are geared to open when they hear those words. You have to think of it that way. It's not like, oh, these doors are, I have to find them and then I have to knock and I have to push through them. It's that open sesame kind of thing, the mantra. It's that these doors are actually created at the beginning of time, at the beginning of lifetimes, to stand there and have you encounter them. And if you stand there and you don't have the mantra, then they're not going to open. People fall back then to the world, or from the ancestors back to the world. But if you have the mantra given to you, and I used to hear this from my teacher, Mother Mantra is the most powerful of all mantras that are possible to be given by a guru, because they'll open all doors. So these doors have ears, as it were, and they're sound ears. You see, they're keys. The keys, vibration is the key to vibrating that ear in that door that'll open, and the mantra is that key. It's that vibration. So it's effective as repetition. Stand there and say it. Tell the door to open. Mantra originates in the Bodhi mind. That's in the intellect, which is, we go looking back on this, you see what we just talked about in the prana chart. That level of mind and intellect, if prana gets to the mind, next thing is going to get to the intellect, and finally the cosmic intellect. That's a powerful way to move inward. On the other column, it provides protection during practice, because a strange anomaly or phenomenon basically is that when you start to practice, all of Maya comes rushing to put up doors. They all close, as it were, and as if misery loves company. But we have to remember that freedom loves company too. It's called holy company. And so if you get the mantra from a person in holy company called your guru, who's the leader of your sangha, and then you practice it after selecting that guru, and then you have the blessing of this mantra for all time. That's spiritual awakening right there, per se. And some people maybe don't use it for a while. We used to call that thieves in the night. Thieves in the night, when people came to our guru and got initiated through good graces that he showed upon them, and then they ran away and we never heard of them again. So at some point that seed is planted, and it'll be there for people. And so it provides protection while you practice it. It clears the subconscious mind. So there's a muck at the bottom of the mind with lots of thoughts and acts that have been done over lifetimes. The mantra will just make its way through that, clear it away. 1/4 of the mantra is given by the guru at the time of initiation. So I remember my teacher sitting with him at front of the shrine, and he was an Advaita Vedantist, and he was giving me initiation into the path. And I remember what he told me and what he had me repeat and what I was supposed to understand about this precious moment. And after I got out of that precious moment, and it was so overwhelming that it was hard to remember it, then I had like Six and our founder there, who was 10 years my senior, telling me, do you realize what just happened to you? You got the mantra from a Jivan Mukta soul, from a living liberated soul, the last living devotee of Holy Mother Sri Sharda Devi on earth. You got it. So he was right there to emphasize the fact that this was spiritual awakening per se. And now it just needed to be practiced. So that's 1/4 of the mantra that you got. There's 3 other quarters. They call that Tripura Sundari, by the way. There's an Upanishad called Tripura Sundari Upanishad, which tells you about how the mantra, when you practice it, goes deeper, deeper, and deeper to 3 other echelons inside of you, which will end you up at Kaivalya. So that's what's next. 3/4 of the mantra is hidden as Mother's form. First her gross form in a picture maybe, then her subtle form, if she's not living in the body, then the form of a thought of her, your vision of her in the mind, and finally her most formless form, like say Mother Kali form, we'd say. So finally, mantra grants grants knowledge of unity. The unity of all things, which I was talking about earlier, that prana helps you facilitate early on. And they're associated with deities, and they're innumerable. So there's where you don't want to become confused. That guru and yourself as a sincere seeker will consult And well, it won't just be, oh, here, I'll sell you a word or two. Or it won't just be, here's a mantra, do what you want with it. That's not the way we experienced it in our tradition. We were told how to use it, what it signified, and what it should be doing. And then you went back and got it. Lit your torch on it again if you needed to. And we found out how to do it on our hands. We found out how to do it on our beads. We found out how to do it uttering it. We found out how to do it in our minds. So all of these were levels of practice of the mantra that we continued on. Some of us now living for 40, 50 years, and people who passed before us for 80, 90 years, like my teacher. So this great, or as long as he needed to, or as long as he wanted it to help others, because you can master the mantra yourself and say it on behalf of others. People have been coming to me and saying, what do I say to my dying father or grandfather and so forth? And, well, you have a mantra, right? So there are ways in which you can help people by thinking about them in terms of the words in the mantra and keeping in mind the vision of your grandfather, say, with the deity of the mantra. At the same time, you envision this, and maybe do 49 days of repetition of it like that. And go on after they pass for another 49 days, whatever's in your tradition. And maybe, because I'm not going through every little quote, I'm leaving that for you to go back and see in Footfalls of the Indian Rishis, as we continue to plug that for the highest good of all beings, that new book. We can bring this to an end by these final two quotes in the bottom. Holy Mother says, the Master gave me mantras possessing great power, and all of them are associated with the deities. They are imbued with the power of renunciation. If you want to all look on our website, our ASR website online, if you're members, you can look on that and find a wealth of teachings about so many different Dharmic subjects. The last God blog I posted on that website is called Renunciation is Immediate. It has to do with how renunciation can be premature, it can be immature, and it can also be very mature. And that final is a very immediate effect out of it. So look that up online and spend time in between these classes, in between these Sundays, if these Sundays are all you're participating in. Remember, there are two events Saturday mornings that are very powerful, which we gather for. And finally, also, she said, man achieves the highest goal through the practice of japa. God has given us fingers that we might be blessed by repeating his name. Be content under all circumstances and repeat his name. So giving some additional and necessary extra advice about how to, the atmosphere in which to do the mantra. You think about the Divine Mother and think about how things connect in that way. If you can't find those teachings on that kind of intimacy in the scriptures all the time, easily accessible, then write a song about them like I did. Sarvajnana Shakti Mahakundalini Jivatma Paramatma Dharini Sri Devi Rudrani Kalaratri Devi Vijaya Devi Maheshani Sri Yogamai Chit Shakti Devi Jaya Vijaya Devi Vasundari Shri Mantra Shakti Mata Deva Devi Dasa Tattva Devi Shakti Darshini Shri Devi Padam Shri Devi Padam, which translates into English this way: O progenitress of all penetrating wisdom, who flows imperceptibly as subtle spiritual current within the subtle body. You hold all souls and absolute reality within you. Though often terrible to behold, great lady, appearing as the black night of incomprehensible voidness, you hold knowledge and ignorance in abeyance and loose them for your own purposes. O all-attracting presence, O all alluring and puissant form, you animate the five elements and exude sublime intelligence as well, being ever victorious over all. O goddess of all the gods, who embodies as comprehension in all the great statements, you operate all cosmic principles and grant communion with divine nature. Shri Devi Padam, Shri Devi Padam, Shri Devi Padam, Shri Devi Padam. So these names, Sarvajnana Shakti, Mahakundalini, Jivatma, Paramatma, Dharini, all very powerful names of the Divine Mother, actually found in the scriptures. India does hold two very precious scriptures on Divine Mother, other than the Puranas, scriptures in their own right, called the Chandi, or Devi Durga Saptasati, sometimes it's called, and then also the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam, which was translated into English by Swami Vigatmananda, or Swami Vijnanananda. Actually, I met his student, Vigatmananda. But Swami Vijnanananda translated all of that Sanskrit into English in a book about this big. And so the reading of that confers great auspiciousness. So there are scriptures on Divine Mother reality that can and should be taken up by the worshiper of Shakti, which is leading us towards her. And she's there all the time. She's, as the song says, as the scriptures and verses say, she causes this subtle spiritual current within the subtle body to flow imperceptibly. So at first, you're unawares of it, even though your breath is happening by it. You're seeing because of it. You're hearing because of it. You're tasting because of it. That's this prana shakti, and several prana shaktis really that are going on if you look at the Kundalini yoga system. But you become more and more aware of her. And when you get to eternal holy company, frequent holy company, select a guru and secure a mantra, then that understanding gets a fine point on it. And with the time remainder, we can say then basically that in this time we have brought ourselves up to the conclusion of a crash course, you might say, in prana and everything that went before it, like pure food and breathing and posture and so forth. Typically yogic in this way, by way of practice, but with other elements mixed in here by way of Vedanta and non-dual reality. So we can talk about the Guru next, so that we will have made progress towards psychic prana, and we can probably pick that up next Sunday. So you see these three we're taking all in one big breath, as it were. Frequent holy company, select a guru, and secure mantra. So those don't necessarily happen in just that order, but depending on the soul's readiness and the relationship between the guru and disciple, which actually is much like the relationship between the mind and the energy. There has to be these divine, intimate relationships formed inside. So in the remaining time, which isn't a lot, I'll just read down to you a little bit of what to find in a guru. Remember, there are other charts, like Shankara has left us behind the four signs of the knower of Brahman. That's a very beautiful way of making sure that you have an authentic guru before you. Of course, it takes a jeweler to recognize the value of a diamond. So you can't really assess or access a true guru until you yourself have gotten at least these prerequisites, among them being possession of pure prana. And you can go into holy company then and be relatively sure of what you hear and see. So the Nirvana Upanishad says, those qualified souls who are fit to study the Upanishads are protectors of the field in which I-ness is destroyed. So looking to get rid of that small ego we talked about earlier in today's class, turn it into the great I. Let's make a great offering of the small I into the great I. Sometimes we chant that, Om Tat Nayo Ra Vrin Ni Mahe. To them, all beings in the world are just pure consciousness. That's what I was speaking about earlier. They come from inside out, so they come with that knowledge of pure consciousness. They don't have to earn it out there somehow or take a lot of time to recover it. To them, talk about the uprooting of karmas amounts to mere words. For the illusion of I-ness has been cremated and spread about in the cemetery of the self, of Brahman. For others, these luminaries present a ship with which to cross the ocean of earthly existence. Isn't that beautiful? And that's the Nirvana Shatkam telling us these great things about these illumined souls. What's their ideal? Quickly, the final beatitude. How do you describe their heart? It's a river of immortality. Who's their preceptor? A realized sage. What's their activity look like? It's always free of convention. So they'll be going beyond mundane human convention and all its religions, beyond churches and so forth, and finding this high sky of awareness that sometimes our founder called the truth beyond religion, or the sky of awareness beyond all religion. So he was looking into that all his life. What's their knowledge like? Well, it's comprehensive. I said that earlier. I said sometimes you're overwhelmed by it. When these nadis open up, they can't help but just exude that. Sri Ramakrishna himself was known for that he'd start with one tiny Dharma teaching one day, and a couple of days later, they'd still be listening to him to explain that. And all the connections that went between it were there. So it was amazing. He just opened himself up in these nadis and so forth to Divine Mother Wisdom. And he used to say, then she speaks through me. She speaks through me. What are their instructions to us? Only Brahman exists. What's their dedication to their disciples? Their appearance, like 12 suns. And I won't get into the symbology of that, but you can just pretty much conclude that they're very shiny and very powerful. Their protection as they move about the worlds, which are full of danger and dangerous beings, is the presiding deity. That is, that's in their mantra too. So that deity is always with them. The name is always on their lips and in their mind. their movement is actually the unmani state. So it's like they move with no mind. Everyone else moves with mind and thought. It's just even like reading something on Nikola Tesla today. Some very beautiful things he wrote about science and where it had to go, because he met Swami Vivekananda and they discussed these things. But his thinking too is also about being free of the mind and its thought. There's a higher state than that to achieve. So the unmani state that could be one of the meanings for that. Their clothing is a garland of bliss. Their deep study is of the revealed scriptures. That can be really nothing better, no better advice to do than to find yourself into holy company, find the books that are there amongst them, get a guru, secure a mantra, do the practice, and ask the guru about what's in the revealed scriptures. And we're coming to that, I think. Contemplate scripture. So it's something that maybe some people do a little late. I remember in my case, I did it first for whatever reason. 19 and 20, I was reading works like Vivekachudamani by Shankara and understanding them. So I found the guru later, and of course, that deepened my understanding of what I had studied. Their meaning, the existence of Brahman. Their sleep is oneness with Shiva. Shiva brings everything to an end, right? Like AUM brings everything to an end. Their seat, one seat, free of hatha. So the seers are very against having hatha yoga as your practice, particularly your ultimate practice. Something you could start with, something you need to go beyond quickly and get to one asana. That's called ekasana. So if you can master your posture, your breath and your thoughts will come easily. But if you're thinking of many postures, both your breath is erratic and your mind gets full of different ideas. So it achieves that steadiness and that stillness. That's the point here. Their bliss, free of gunas, and anyone's would be. If the gunas were transcended, you would be trigunatita. You'd be free of that. Their support, the blessed Lord. The blessed Lord of the universe is their eternal support. Their compassion is divine sport. Their renunciation results in separation. That takes a little bit of explanation in time that we don't really have, but their apt conclusion of it all is that existence is. And so that's a non-dual understanding they arrive at. So all of this is the integral constitution of the luminaries. You'll see these qualities and more. These are just some that I gathered out of the Upanishads, particularly the Nirvana Upanishad in this case. And so let's end this chart and this little threesome here, because we did conclude the prana and we did look fairly deeply. I might have a few things to add next week, these three next steps, but we'll probably take up the psychic prana, which is very powerful teaching. And there's not a lot on it, so you'll need to pay attention and take the opportunity of studying it. The final quote on this chart from the Upanishads, the Atma Bodha Upanishad, well named. Just as to an owl the sun is dark, so also for an ignorant person there is darkness in Brahman. But Maya has gone away from me. I am the pure vision. I know myself without a second. I have ascertained the highest truth. A wise man always abandons poison, favoring Amrit, the nectar of non-dual awareness. Om Tachnayo Ravrinyimahe Gatum Yagyaya Gatum Yenapate Daivi Swastirastunaha Swastir Manusedyaha Urdvam jagatu besajam sangno astu dvipade sang chatushpate. Om shantihi shantihi shantihi. May we make a deep and selfless offering of the small self into the great self. May we always delight in this worship. May we always revere the Lord and Mother of all sacrifices. May divine blessings be upon us. May peace be unto the entire human race. May healing, well-being, and prosperity then abide among us. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us. May peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat.